The Baltimore Ravens blow out the Detroit Lions 38-6 in Week 7, and we talk about if they've finally broken through. All that and more on today's episode of Locked On NFL.
You are Locked On NFL, your daily NFL podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome into another episode of the Locked On NFL podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. It is Monday. That means you have me, Kevin Oestreicher, the host of Locked On Ravens and one of the many NFL experts here on our network. We're free and available all podcasting platforms, including over in video form on YouTube. And today's episode of Locked On NFL is brought to you by FanDuel Sportsbook, official sportsbook of Locked On. Make every moment more. Right now, new customers can bet $5 and get $200 in bonus bets guaranteed. Visit FanDuel.com/LockedOn to get started. Again, thank you so much for making Locked On NFL your first listen each and every day. And as always, yes, free and available, all podcasting platforms. That's in audio form, in video form. And we're bringing you the best daily NFL coverage 5 days per week. And we're breaking down all of Sunday's NFL action from Week 7. And we're first going to talk about the Baltimore Ravens. Now, with me being the host of Locked On Ravens, I'll take you through that. It's been a while since I did a segment on the Ravens on Locked On NFL. So I want to do that because what better time than the Ravens blowing out the Detroit Lions 38-6. We'll talk about if they finally broke through in the first part of the show. Then we'll talk with Peter Bukowski of Locked On Packers about what to make of this Packers team after a tough loss to the Denver Broncos. And finally, Aaron Freeman of Locked On Falcons will help us round out the show by talking about the Falcons' rise to the top of the NFC South if they can continue their perch atop the division. So without any further ado, let's talk about the Ravens 38-6. Lions get drubbed in Baltimore, and this was a big game for both teams. I mean, I think it was a nice barometer for the Ravens and the Lions. The Lions coming into this one at 5-1 atop the NFC North. You know, their defense was incredible. Second best rush defense, sixth best pass defense, and the offense. Jared Goff was playing like a borderline top 10, top 12 quarterback. Amon-Ra St. Brown was doing his thing. They've gotten contributions in the run game. The offensive line playing great, but this Ravens team had been looking. They'd been looking on the offensive side of the ball to finally just break through in a game. Didn't matter when. I mean, it had to come at some point. But they had all these games where they had started off either really fast and then fizzled out in the second half, or they started off really slow and then they picked it up as the game went on or as the second half started. There was never a full, consistent 60-minute game where you just thought, all right, pure domination from minute 0 to minute 60. We saw that on Sunday against Detroit. It was a drubbing in every sense of the imagination. Lamar Jackson finishes with over 350 passing yards, plus a rushing touchdown through 3 passing touchdowns, so 4 total for Lamar Jackson. He looked dialed in. The Ravens' offensive line played great, and I think the Lions had a bunch of early mistakes too, which only helped the Ravens. The mistakes weren't the reason the Ravens won. I think they just played a great football game all across the board. But when you're talking about a league right now that has such parity in it, we see all these random teams losing to other random teams. Like, good teams are losing to bad teams every single week. I mean, we literally just saw the Patriots, who have looked terrible for like a month. They end up beating the Bills on a last-second play. Like, it's that type of parity. People counted out the Ravens early because, again, their offense wasn't consistent. Lamar doesn't throw for 300 passing yards a game. To me, I always judge passing off, just offense in general, or stats in general, by yards per attempt in, either passing or rushing. Because obviously, if you run the ball more than any other team, you're probably going to have the most rushing yards in the league, or at least you're going to be near the top of the league. But if you run the ball a lot less, your pure rushing yardage is going to be towards the bottom. So per attempt gives me a better understanding of, okay, even if they're not running a lot, are they making the most of their attempts? If they're not passing a lot, are they making the most of their attempts? Plus, completion percentage for me for Lamar Jackson has been huge, and he's been hovering around that top 5, top 3 category for a while now. But I think people discount him because of the fact that, he's not throwing for 350 and his stat line, his box score isn't flashy. When if you watch the games, if you watch Lamar play, he has dialed in and looked really cool and calm and collected in the pocket this year. He's making big throws. It has not been perfect. The fumbling has been an issue for both Lamar and the Ravens some of the decisions have not been great, but I think he's actually making better decisions than we've seen him make over the past couple of seasons. So the big thing for the Ravens was complementary football. Holding Jared Goff in that. I mean, Jared Goff could get nothing against this Ravens defense. It was impossible for him to make solid throws for most of the game. And when, Amon-Ra St. Brown had 19 targets in this one, he ended up, having 10 catches, I think it was, but that was late in the game. The Ravens were just trying to get out and be healthy. Now, for the Lions, I do want to say that they're probably going to run away with the NFC North. They're a good football team. I think that this was just the Ravens' day. This had been kind of knocking at the door for a while now, where they hadn't had a game like this, but there was too much talent on the offensive side of the ball with them bringing in Odell Beckham Jr. and Zay Flowers and them still having Rashad Bateman and Mark Andrews and the run game with Gus Edwards and Justice Hill and Lamar, obviously. It just felt like a game like this was going to come. And again, the Lions hadn't faced a defense like the Ravens, and the Ravens hadn't faced an offense like the Lions. It went both ways, and when those two things came head on, it was the Ravens that came out on top. I think that every game won't be 38-6, right? Even against worse teams than the Lions, every game won't be 38-6. It's a week-to-week league. Again, the Ravens have suffered their own bad losses, right? Every team suffers bad losses and has really good wins. This was a really, really good win for the Ravens, and I'm not trying to take away from that. This was a game to me, though, that with the Ravens last year, they had this win-loss, win-loss, win-loss thing where they could never really get on a roll. This is now their second 2-game win streak of the year. And I'm hopeful that it can spark something because the offense did not look this good all season. Plus, with the fact that Todd Monken's offense, to me at least, was never expected to be this, they're going to go out there and score 60 points a game and win, every single game by 30 points. There was always going to be an adjustment period with this offense. So I'm not out here to say that, the Ravens offense is going to be the best offense in the league from here on out. There are still some things to clean up. It was not a perfect day. It was about as close to one as you could have, but it was not a perfect day. There was still a fumble and a couple of other incompletions, and the Ravens felt that way too. They were kind of hung up on the stuff they didn't do as opposed to all the good they did. But all in all, a very impressive win by the Ravens, and I do think that this could be the breakthrough. I'm not saying, again, that everything's going to be sunshine and rainbows till the Super Bowl and they win everything. It's going to be a lot of work to get there, but I think this was a very positive breakthrough for them. Coming up, though, in the second part of this show, we're going to be diving into the Packers with Peter Bukowski of Locked On Packers, talking about what to make of the team, so be sure to stay tuned. Plenty to talk about on this episode of Locked On NFL. First, this episode is sponsored by eBay Motors, and our partners at eBay Motors have teamed up with Locked On Fantasy Football host Vinny Iyer to bring you some of the best fantasy picks each week all season long. Whether you're prepping for a daily draft or scouting the waiver wire, every week we're going to be providing you the players that are guaranteed to fit on your roster. So let's see who Vinny's picked out for us in this week's eBay Guaranteed Fit Fantasy Picks of the week. And Jets wide receiver Garrett Wilson is coming off a bye in week 8 and he's looking to build on his momentum with an improved Zach Wilson to have a big game against the Giants. That's who they're going to be going up against in week 8. You can start spreading the news in this New York battle. The Giants secondary cannot cover him well, and it has already given up big games to Deebo Samuel, Tyreek Hill, and Stephon Diggs. Garrett Wilson's a great talent, and the Jets are now back to using him as a dominant number 1. Look for him to keep coming through with his best all-around game yet in fantasy in 2023. And again, Vinny Iyer from Locked On Fantasy Football is going to help you win your fantasy championship, and eBay Motors knows the championship team is about each player being a perfect fit. Same with your vehicle. With over 122 million parts for your number 1 ride or die, you can make sure your ride stays running smoothly. They have brake kits, LED headlights, roof rack, bumpers, whatever your ride needs, eBay Motors has it. With eBay Guaranteed Fit, it's guaranteed to fit your ride the first time, every time, or your money back. Plus, at these prices, you're burning rubber, not cash. Keep your ride or die alive at ebaymotors.com. eBay Guaranteed Fit, only available to U.S. customers. All times, all exclusions apply. We're back here. It's our second segment of Locked On NFL. Kevin Oestreicher still talking football with you here. And again, reminder, football season is here and Locked On is kicking up our coverage with Locked On NFL Kickoff Live, which means each Friday Locked On is going to go live at 2 p.m. Eastern on every Locked On NFL YouTube channel. And they're going to bring you everything you need to know on the NFL slate to get ready for your team's matchup, your fantasy lineups, your betting angles, and a lot more. So find Locked On NFL Kickoff Live every Friday at 2 p.m. Eastern time on any Locked On NFL YouTube channel. We just talked Ravens in this Locked On NFL episode, but now we're going to dive into the Packers with Peter Bukowski of Locked On Packers after a tough Denver loss. We're going to talk about what to make of this team coming up now. The Green Bay Packers suffer a crushing defeat to the Denver Broncos in Denver, 19-17. Here to talk about that with me, Peter Bukowski, the host of Locked On Packers. And Peter, it seemed like the Packers had a shot at the end there to steal the game away from Denver late, but Jordan Love throws an interception, and Russell Wilson bombs the out of the ball to give the Broncos a win. What do you make of this game? The Broncos have not been a great team this season. I know losing to them is kind of like a demerit on the resume. So how'd they let this one slip away? And what do you make of a loss like this?
They can't get going in the first half. I mean, that is this season in a nutshell for the Green Bay Packers. They have been one of the worst, in fact, the worst first half offense in the league. And they have been a top 5 offense in the second half in the league. I mean, it makes, and it cashes out right where you'd expect it. They were coming into the game, they were 13th in EPA per play, right in the middle, right? Like if you're great in the first half or great in the second half and bad in the first half, you probably cash out somewhere in the middle. And that's where they are in the aggregate. They're an okay team, but against teams that are just like passable, they're going to have problems if they keep starting slow like this. Now against the Bears, they started a little faster and they were able to, in the third quarter, blow the doors off a bad Bears team. Well, right now the Bears, with a backup quarterback, played the team the Packers just played in the Raiders and looked much better, understanding Jimmy Garoppolo played in the game 2 weeks ago. Brian Hoyer played in this most recent one, but that has nothing to do with how Tyler Badgett and their 4th string running back, Deontay Foreman, looked against the same Raiders defense. So they have not been able to find the dials correctly when like against the Saints, for example, they come back and they tear up the Saints in the fourth quarter, come back from 17 down. They win that game in dramatic fashion. Then they go out and they think, okay, well, spread it out. Let's sling the ball down the field. That's the best way to win these football games. And they can't block the Detroit Lions and they can't get the ball down the field. And by the way, the defense played terrible in that Lions game. And then in the second half, what happens? Bombs away. They in the second half, they make a game of it by letting Jordan Love cook, but they can't quite get the urgency right to start these games. If we just took their second half performances, they'd be like 5-1 right now, but they're not because you have to play 4 quarters, Kevin. I don't know if you know that, but by rule, they called the league office and they said, hey, we'd really like to just play quarters 3 and 4. And if they did that, they'd be in great shape. It's not how this works. And so they're going to have to find some more consistency right now because this is not a season right now, Kevin, about winning and losing. It is about evaluation and growth. And it's becoming really hard to evaluate Jordan Love when you can't block anybody, when guys are running into each other, when your play caller can't decide if he wants to be really aggressive or really conservative with no in between. It's becoming difficult to evaluate Jordan Love. And that's the biggest problem right now for this team.
So where do you go from here if you're the Packers? Because obviously you want to see what you can get with Jordan Love and the rest of this offense and defense. But with the trade deadline coming up on Halloween, is this a team, I'm not saying trade Jerry Alexander. I mean, hey, for the Ravens, that would I wouldn't be mad. Wouldn't be mad at it. But do you maybe start to sell off some of these pieces that don't have such a long-term future in Green Bay? Or do you try to salvage a season to say, you know what, let's see if Jordan Love can take us somewhere like maybe a wild card berth?
Listen, Jair Alexander and Lamar Jackson played on the same Louisville team. They go way back. And so that would be a cool reunion if he's going to go anywhere. But, if you're the Packers, you're going, how about 2 first-round picks? Like we want the Jalen Ramsey deal. And then you still have to, continue to pay him at that top of market money. So I don't see the Packers as having many pieces that they're going to be interested in moving. Most of their players are they fall into one of 2 categories. They're either good, expensive players like David Bakhtiari, Kenny Clark, soon to be Rashawn Gary, Jair Alexander, all those guys, or they're young players who are cheap, guys like Christian Watson and Romeo Doubs and Luke Musgrave and even someone like AJ Dillon, Aaron Jones. Those are guys that you need to evaluate Jordan Love, which is the only thing that matters to this team right now. Devondre Campbell, I think, is a name that could be interesting if you were going to look to sell. Preston Smith is a name that could be interesting if you were looking to sell, given the salary cap there. He's an older player who doesn't quite fit their timeline. And Rashawn Gary, Lucas Van Ness, Kingsley Enagbare, they have some nice players there behind him if they wanted to go that route. But those are like their only veteran players. So do you really want to give when the youth movement is going as tenuously as it currently is do you really want to just sell everything? I don't think the NFL tends to work that way. I go the other way, Kevin. I think this team wants to be a buyer. I think they want to bring in a veteran receiver, someone who's going to be a stabilizing force. And I think they're aiming high. They have reportedly called Denver about some of their receivers. That means Cortland Sutton. That means Jerry Jeudy. They made an offer last year for Jerry Jeudy. They made an offer last year for Darren Waller. Now that was with Aaron Rodgers, but I don't think they really thought they were going to be a Super Bowl contender last year. They're still in the market for a veteran receiver. There are some names out there that have been whispered into my ear that I'm not going to repeat, but they would be interesting if I did. I'm sorry that I can't do anything better than that, Kevin, but names you've certainly heard of, names that are certainly on most people's fantasy football, on rosters in their leagues. I think they're more likely to become buyers precisely for the reasons that I mentioned. They have to get an evaluation on Jordan Love, and it's becoming really hard to do that when you can't trust your guys to block. The run blocking is terrible right now for the Packers. Getting Aaron Jones back was nice. And the receivers, like there was a third down in this game, a third and manageable, 3rd and 4, 3rd and 6, something pretty manageable. And you have two guys. It's just a stick concept. You have one guy going to the stick, one guy going to the out. And they both went to the out. Same thing happened 2 weeks ago, Kevin, on a third down. Different players, but the same thing. And it's like, this can't happen. And it becomes really hard to evaluate your quarterback when that's happening around him.
Well, I have to ask you, since, we've talked about Jordan Love, I want to ask you about him specifically. We talked throughout the offseason, Peter, about what would make this a successful season for Jordan Love. What do you expect from Jordan Love? Well, we're through 7 weeks now, 6 Packers games. What have you seen from him based off what your expectations were?
I expected the offense to look different, frankly. I think we saw the version of this offense that I thought we would see. I would say the purest form of it was against the Bears is a cop-out answer because they just blew the doors off the Bears and they hit their trick plays, like the throwback screen, touchdown, perfect. Leak, they ran, perfect. But the Falcons game, when they did not have Aaron Jones, they did not have Christian Watson, they did not have David Bakhtiari. They went in there and they schemed their way up to 24 points. And in the third quarter, they got a 2-score lead. They look great. Jordan Love is making some nice throws. He's taking care of the ball. Dontavian Wicks on a strike concept. That's a bread and butter. They try and throw strike. It's not there. Jordan Love rolls to his right, hits Romeo Doubs on the corner route. Beautiful. On the chair route. It's just that stuff is not happening right now. And they don't seem, to my earlier point, to have the dials quite calibrated right at the moment. They're trying to figure out ways to get their playmakers more involved. Matt LaFleur can't decide if he wants Jordan Love to check it down or throw it deep. Jordan Love can't seem to decide if he wants to check it down or throw it deep. This does echo, if this is sounding familiar to NFC North fans, echo some of the things that have happened with Justin Fields and is somewhat similar in a lot of ways. So I think the Packers have to figure out a way to get him a little bit more on the move, more play action. His feet were a big part of the game plan in this one, and he used them effectively. If you look at the raw numbers, Kevin, 0.32 EPA per play in this game, 8 out of 6.8, his lowest of the season. That's probably right where you'd want it. You'd want it in that like 7-ish range. He'd led the league in average depth of target. They're bombs away. And I just don't think you can live consistently that way, especially when your offensive line can't block. So they have to get this intermediate passing game going. They have to get this short passing game going. And that allows everything to open up with the deep passing game. I am still a buy on this offense because I think their stock is as low as it's going to get. Matt LaFleur, though, is where I'm concerned. I thought Matt LaFleur would do a better job because I think very highly of Matt LaFleur of putting these guys in a position to succeed. I think other teams do more with less talent than Green Bay has, even given all the young players that they have. And so I expected more of Matt LaFleur. I expected him to put Jordan Love in more positions to succeed. He hasn't done that. Jordan Love has to play better, but it's just not what I expected, frankly.
Major shout out to Peter for his Packers analysis. And for more on that, be sure to check him out over the Locked On Packers podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Coming up in the final part of the show, Aaron Freeman will join us to talk about the Falcons and if they can stay on top of the NFC South long term. So be sure to stay tuned. A lot to come here on Locked On NFL. But first, this episode is brought to you by FanDuel Sportsbook. And snap into action this NFL season with FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. Right now, new customers get $200 in bonus bets guaranteed when you place a $5 bet. That's $200 in bonus bets, win or lose. And if you've been thinking about joining FanDuel, there's no better time to get in on the action. The app is super easy to use, and there's a wide range of betting options, including spreads, player props, over-unders, and more. So visit FanDuel.com/lockedon and kick off the NFL season. You can, maybe if you want to go back to that Ravens game, right? Lamar Jackson overs. You bet that on FanDuel. You're probably living good right now with that. Ravens, pretty much any Ravens over and most Lions unders would get you a lot on FanDuel if you bet those week 7. So again, visit FanDuel.com/lockedon and kick off the NFL season. FanDuel, official partner of the NFL. We're back here rounding out Locked On NFL. Kevin Oestreicher, your host, still talking with you. And let's dive into the Falcons now. They've been an interesting team to watch all season, a lot of storylines there, and they come off a big last-second win over the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. So Aaron Freeman of Locked On Falcons will break down everything going on with Atlanta now. The Atlanta Falcons pull out a major last-second victory over the Tampa Bay Buccaneers in Week 7. Here to talk about that with me is Aaron Freeman, the host of Locked On Falcons. And Aaron, it was a big win for the Falcons, playing for first place in the NFC South. Atlanta comes up on top and now is in first place, which we'll get to in a couple of minutes. But I want to first start off with this whole game because it was a little wild, especially with some of the usages of their stars, including Bijan Robinson, who I don't think had a touch until very late into the game. What was kind of going on with Bijan, and how'd the Falcons pull out this win?
Yeah, we'll get a little bit more information on Bijan, but basically the word is he was feeling under the weather. He had a really bad headache or something. So I guess we'll get some more details on, is it a migraine? What's going on with that? But they basically didn't feel comfortable playing him outside of a handful of snaps. Why they put him out there on the final drive, I was like, oh, I guess you're feeling better now to get this one carry to run out the clock. I don't know, but it didn't matter. The Falcons ran for 156 yards on the ground against a pretty tough Bucs defense, and they were able to get it done with Tyler Algier and Cordero Patterson, which was their 1-2 combination last year that led to the top 3 offense. And we haven't really seen the Falcons run game really get going in the last couple of weeks, and that's been a contributing factor to some of their struggles, because the expectation with this team is they're going to be one of the best rushing teams in the league. And outside of a handful of games, they haven't looked like that team. But today, they definitely looked much better on the ground, and that was allowing them to maybe overcome some of the other issues with not being able to convert in the red zone, 1 for 5. But they were able to move the ball effectively on the ground. And so we'll see what's going on with Bijan. But so far, so good with the Falcons' overall run game.
And in terms of the passing game, I know Desmond Ridder has been a very hot topic of conversation over there in Atlanta this year, Aaron. Then this one throws 250 yards, doesn't have an interception, no touchdowns for him outside of the ground score, so no passing ones for him. But what have you seen from him this year, and specifically in this game?
Yeah, it's funny because last week he threw 3 picks, and this week he threw no picks. You're like, oh, Desmond Ridder played better, and then he fumbled 3 times, right? Now, some of those fumbles weren't on him, but one of them definitely was where he fumbled it out of the end zone. On what would have been his second touchdown run of the day, and that was a touchback. And so you've seen progress from Ridder the last couple of weeks. The turnovers have been the biggest issue for him all season long, but like you're starting to see this offense the last couple of weeks, they've had no problem moving the ball against various teams. It's just a question of whether or not after they move the ball between the 20s, can they punch it in? They weren't able to do that today. Again, 1 for 5 in the red zone. But I think Ridder's trending in the right direction. It's just some of the hiccups with the turnovers are like giving you a lot of pause, because it's just like, if we can run the ball as well as the Falcons did today, it's like, just manage the game, and when you're turning the ball over 3 times back-to-back games, like that's not doing a great job managing the game. So there's positives with Ridder, there's negatives with Ridder, and hopefully as these next 10 games play out, the positives will far start to outweigh the negatives. But it's been a little too of a balance of a scale so far this year to feel really great about Ridder today. But we'll ask me again in a month, Kevin, and maybe we'll feel a lot better about him.
Right, although he has led the Falcons to best record in the NFC South so far. So again, we'll see if that holds in a month. But I know, Aaron, the Falcons spent a lot of money and a lot of time revamping that defense in the offseason. They bring in all 3 levels, multiple playmakers. What have you seen from that unit so far?
Yeah, the defense has been their saving grace. It's been the most consistent thing on this football team. It's kept them in pretty much every game and given them opportunities going into the fourth quarter where, I think 6 out of their 7 games were one score games going into the fourth quarter or at the beginning of the fourth quarter with the team, having a chance to potentially win it. And obviously they've been able to do that 4 out of those 6 times. So the defense has been great, and it's been a lot of the new faces that you're talking about: David Onyemata, Calais Campbell, Jesse Bates, Jeff Okudah. They got an undrafted rookie, Nate Landman, out of Colorado, who's stepped up real big in the absence of a injured linebacker, Troy Anderson. Caden Ellis, the other linebacker, has been solid. So it's really been all 3 levels, as you said. Multiple players. Pretty much everybody that's new on this defense has been making plays, and then you still have guys like AJ Terrell and Grady Jarrett, and you got a real critical interception from Richie Grant, the 3rd-year safety for the Falcons, on Sunday. So far so good with this defense. They've kept this team in every game, and hopefully that trend continues, and hopefully the offense will be able to take advantage of all those opportunities, and they will be able to get more of these sort of close, ugly wins down the stretch. And it won't do much for my heart health, but I'll take what I can get with this team.
Right. And again, the Falcons on top of the NFC South right now at 4-3, Tampa being 3-3, Saints 3-4, and the Panthers I don't think are going anywhere this year with that 0-6 record, Aaron. But do you feel like, we talked about it in the offseason a little bit, is this the Falcons division to lose right now? Or is there still a little bit more they have to prove to you for you to feel confident in that?
Yeah, I mean, well, I'm always going to feel like they got something to prove. That's just me. But it is their division to lose. I made note going into this game, they have the easiest schedule left remaining this season. And you got to start winning the games on this easy schedule. You got to start taking advantage of that. And you feel a lot better about this team going into their late season stretch. They got a week 11 bye. 4 out of the last 6 games, or 4 out of the last 7. Sorry, I can't do math. Games are divisional games, and being 2-0 going into that stretch in the division makes you feel a lot better. That essentially, if they can kind of split those last 4 games, they should be able to win the division, assuming that they can take care of business, outside the division. And so I think you feel real good about where this team is, and that the arrow is still pointing up for this team, because you're still not getting the best version of, I think, what Desmond Ridder has the potential to be. And you still haven't had your run game has showed up maybe for half of the season. So it's like this offense feels like, there's still probably like 40% left, that you're only getting 6% of this offense that you possibly can. You're getting probably 98% out of this defense. So it does feel like the arrow is pointing up for this team. They just got to have to clean things up on offense. And if they do, I really like where this team has the potential to be going down the stretch, heading into the postseason, and potentially winning the NFC South.
If you want to check out Aaron's work, be sure to follow him over at the Locked On Falcons podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. He does great work over there, so be sure to check him out. But that's all I have for you here today on Locked On NFL. Thank you so much for tuning in today. Coming up tomorrow, more NFL content with your Tuesday hosts. So be sure to stay tuned for that. We'll see you right back here tomorrow on Locked On NFL.